Welcome to the Book of Mormon, Digging Deeper. Today we're discussing Doctrine and Covenants, Section 10. I have to start out by apologizing to some of you out there. For some unknown reason, the day after I posted my last episode, which was on Oliver Cowdery, the server that handles these episodes for the various podcast providers magically switched the audio file to an episode I did on Samuel the Lamanite about 2 years ago. I have no idea why it did this or even how it did it, but some of you got an episode on Samuel, which I think was a pretty good episode in its own right, but still not the intended one. I was unable to change that posting, so I had to delete it, rename it, and replace and install the correct file to get it back to Oliver Cowdery. It is fixed now. If you haven't already gotten it, I invite you to try once more. The 10th section of the Doctrine and Covenants is a very interesting document. From reading Doctrine and Covenants sections 3 and 5, it would appear that the matter of Martin Harris and the lost 116 pages of manuscript had been settled during the summer of 1828. But here in this 10th section, we seem to get a follow-on to those sections, and once again, Martin Harris is rather soundly rebuked. Why this is odd is because from what was indicated in section 5, the Lord and Martin had apparently made peace, and promises were again extended to Martin as he humbled himself and repented. But when we get to this 10th section, the language again turns harsh and condemnatory. Here's how this section begins. The Lord is speaking to Joseph Smith, but refers to Martin Harris. Now behold, I say unto you that because you delivered up those writings which you had power to translate by the means of the Urim and Thummim into the hands of a wicked man, you have lost them. And you also lost your gift at the same time, and your mind became darkened. Nevertheless, it is now restored unto you again. Therefore, see that you are faithful and continue on unto the finishing of the remainder of the work of the translation as you have begun. So here we see Harris once again referred to as a wicked man. Now, early on, this section was prefaced with a heading that stated that it was received in May of 1829. But with the publication of the 1921 edition of the Doctrine and Covenants, that heading was changed, and now we read this. Revelation given to Joseph Smith the prophet at Harmony, Pennsylvania, likely around April 1829, though portions may have been received as early as the summer of 1828. This is important because we know that Joseph Smith lost his ability to translate for a time in June of 1828, but then had that gift returned a while later when he and Emma began the translation once again, and that was in the fall of 1828. I think this is indicated by section 10, verses 2 and 3, where it says, you also lost your gift at the same time, and your mind became darkened. Nevertheless, it is now restored unto you again. That now was just a short time later, probably no later than September 22nd of 1828, because we have record of Emma joining Joseph for the translation work on that date, and they worked for the next 6 months until March of 1829. According to a very interesting translation timeline provided by Eldon Watson, the plates were returned on September 22nd, as was, according to him, the revelation of the 10th section of the Doctrine and Covenants. To be fair, there are varying opinions on this matter, and I certainly will stand corrected if any evidence to the contrary comes forth. In any event, I think that if at least some portion of Section 10 were given in 1828, maybe as early as late summer, shortly after the loss of the pages, this would explain why, after seeming to forgive Martin Harris in section 5, the Lord once again calls him a wicked man in section 10. And I should add that it appears Daniel Ludlow agrees with me. This is what he said. Both the plates and the Urim and Thummim were removed for a few days. It was necessary that the young prophet should learn the lesson that he was entirely dependent on the Lord. When they were restored, he received the revelation in section 10, containing instructions to himself with regard to the lost portion of the manuscript. And we get this directly from Joseph Smith as recorded in the history of the church. After I had obtained the above revelation, and there he's referring to section 3, both the plates and the Urim and Thummim were taken from me again, but a few days later they were returned to me when I inquired of the Lord, and the Lord said thus to me. And the note that follows says that he's speaking now of section 10. This would make sense and seem more timely. Nevertheless, the heading of section 10 says, likely around April 29, though portions may have been received as early as the summer of 1828. One report I read said that the revelation was received on September 22, 1828, and that Joseph and Emma started translating on October 16th of 1828. Again, it doesn't really matter, except as an academic interest. I'm just glad it got translated. With regard to the timing of the revelation given as section 10, one important thing to remember is that usually revelations were not written down or transcribed immediately upon receipt, and most probably this revelation was combined with a further revelation on the related subject of the lost pages, received later when Oliver showed up and the subject of where do we start was brought up. That would make sense. I don't know where the break was between the early section 10 and late section 10, but if I had to guess, I'd say maybe at verse 8. Verse 4 says, do not run faster or more than you have strength and means provided to enable you to translate, but be diligent unto the end. This could be referring to Emma's weakened condition and also to the pressing worldly matters Joseph was facing. And it seems that with the arrival of Oliver Cowdery, those two men ran very fast through the remaining scriptures, completing the whole work in just 2 months. Now, we spoke last week of the difficulty that Joseph and Emma had in translating due to several factors, including Emma's health and the heavy workload they were both under, just to survive and take care of worldly matters. This same record says that Joseph and Emma only translated 62 pages, but still, that was a significant contribution. And to just what they translated, that's a stickier issue. Some accounts indicate that they must have started with Mosiah, which was apparently where Joseph and Martin had left off, although other records insist that Joseph and Martin only translated the Book of Lehi. Still, other accounts claim that Joseph and Martin translated more than 116 pages, which would have carried on beyond the Book of Lehi, and that it was only the Book of Lehi that Martin took home. We'll have more on that later. In section 5, verse 30, the Lord commands Joseph thus, behold, I say unto thee, Joseph, when thou hast translated a few more pages, thou shalt stop for a season, even until I command thee again, then thou mayest translate again. It's that few more pages comment that makes me think they had to finish a certain part, a natural stopping point, which I believe was the balance of the story of Nephi and Jacob and on up to perhaps the beginning of the story of Mosiah and King Benjamin. The record we have today, which includes 1st and 2nd Nephi, Jacob, Enos, Jerem, and Omni, is that part which the Lord had held in reserve to cover for the loss of the 116 pages of the Book of Lehi. So to me, it seems logical that the record of the small plates would have been the most logical place for Joseph and Emma to start and to finish before Joseph and Oliver got back to work on the record of the large plates. In the end, I don't think it's really important to know the particulars. What is important, as I said before, is that the whole book was translated in more or less than 14 months from start to finish, including the few pauses in the work. Joseph and Oliver translated 360 pages in just 2 months, which is remarkable when you consider that it took Grandin's publishing house a team of 5 men 7 months to set the type. Now, the tone of section 10 definitely shifts at the beginning of verse 8, and even though the Lord has appeared to forgive Martin Harris earlier, he is once again referred to as a wicked man in verses 5, 6, and 7. Here's what they say: Pray always that you may come off as a conqueror, that you may conquer Satan, and that you may escape the hands of the servants of Satan that do uphold his work. Behold, they have sought to destroy you. Yea, even the man in whom you trusted has sought to destroy you. And for this cause I said that he is a wicked man, for he has sought to take away the things wherewith you have been entrusted, and he has also sought to destroy your faith. That seems harsh, but we know that the Lord did provide a way for Martin to eventually return to his good graces. The primary message of the 10th section is a revelation about the nature of Satan and of the evil men who fall victim to his schemes. And in this, it is very explicit, revealing the specific plans laid to destroy Joseph's work. The scriptures are so clear that very little explanation is required. Nevertheless, I feel I should at least say something about them. Let's hear what section 10 has to say on the subject. Starting in verse 8, and Satan hath put it into their hearts to alter the words which you have caused to be written, or which you have translated, which have gone out of your hands. And behold, I say unto you that because they have altered the words, they read contrary from that which you translated and caused to be written. And on this wise the devil has sought to lay a cunning plan that he may destroy this work. For he hath put it into their hearts to do this, that by lying they may say they have caught you in the words which you have pretended to translate. But the Lord, being all-knowing, and knowing the hearts and minds of those wicked men, will not be fooled. He says, Verily I say unto you that I will not suffer that Satan shall accomplish his evil design in this thing. And then he tells us what Satan and his confederates are actually thinking. He says, For behold, he has put it into their hearts to get thee to tempt the Lord thy God in asking to translate it over again. And then behold, they think and say in their hearts, We will see if God has given him power to translate. If so, he will also give him power again. And if God giveth him power again, or if he translates again, or in other words, if he bringeth forth the same words, behold, we will have the same with us, and we have altered them. Therefore, they will not agree, and we will say that he has lied in his words, and that he has no gift, and that he has no power. Therefore, we will destroy him and also the work, and we will do this that we may not be ashamed in the end, and that we may get glory of the world. What a blatantly wicked plan. These men are not just taking on Joseph Smith, but also God, for they recognize that God may have indeed given Joseph the power to translate, and they have formulated a plan to cover that possibility. If he does translate again with the same words, indicating that he really does have the power to do so, then they will change what he has translated the first time so that it appears that he lied. One has to wonder, what kind of men were these that they would be willing to disrupt the plans of God if it were shown that they really were the plans of God? And what of Lucy Harris? She claimed to have had a spiritual experience in which she was shown the validity of the work early on. She even tried to assist where she could, and it was only when she couldn't get the sign that she demanded that she turned against the work and against her husband. What happens to people like that? How can they turn on a dime and go completely against that which they were previously in favor of? Nowhere in the records do we get any indication that Lucy Harris found anything that would have convinced her that the work was fraudulent, only that she didn't get to see the plates for herself. And remember, she was thrilled when Martin brought the pages home for her to inspect. She was once again in favor of the project, but then turned evil again after that. The Lord answers that question. He says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you that Satan has great hold upon their hearts. He stirreth them up to iniquity against that which is good. And their hearts are corrupt and full of wickedness and abominations. And they love darkness rather than light, because their deeds are evil. Therefore they will not ask of me. Satan stirreth them up, that he may lead their souls to destruction. And thus he has laid a cunning plan, thinking to destroy the work of God. But I will require this at their hands, and it shall turn to their shame and condemnation in the day of judgment. Yea, he stirreth up their hearts to anger against the work. Yea, he saith unto them, Deceive and lie in wait to catch, that ye may destroy. Behold, this is no harm. And thus he flattereth them, and telleth them that it is no sin to lie, that they may catch a man in a lie, that they might destroy him. And thus he goeth up and down, to and fro in the earth, seeking to destroy the souls of men." I guess we could infer from this that the people involved in this dastardly plan perhaps really thought that Joseph Smith was a liar. And this could have come from Lucy Harris herself, because remember how she ransacked the Smith home looking for the plates, and then when she couldn't find them, she went about telling everyone she could meet that he was a liar out to get her money? I believe that's why verse 25 says that they were convinced that it was not a sin to lie to catch a liar. I'd never really looked at this verse closely before, but now it seems to me that the Lord is revealing one of Satan's great tactics. That is, telling people that it's okay to do what you have to do to catch someone you think is wrong. But this spreads contention, and we're told correctly that contention itself is of the devil. And in any group of people, there will always be those who agree with one point of view and those who disagree with that same point. This is the reality of the world, and this is why there is such a thing as democracy and voting and the voice of the people. It would be nice if we could just air our views and come to a consensus on every item, but I think any of us who have ever paid attention to any political campaign know that both sides will employ every dirty trick they have to defeat the other side. We are constantly bombarded with half-truths or highly edited comments supposedly spoken by the opposition. One of the great tasks in any election period is to determine just who is telling the truth, or at least the most truth. So here in section 10, we're getting a very good lesson on how Satan works to spread this contention and ill will among otherwise reasonable people. I believe it's a very good lesson and a warning for us all. He doesn't need truly evil people to do his bidding. He can work just fine with otherwise normal people who genuinely feel offended at some situation. They may be wrong, but if they think they are right, they will fight to defend that position. And if that position is that Joe Smith and his gold Bible are all part of the devil's work, then he should be stopped at all costs. Remember that Martin Harris warned Joseph, if this work was of the devil, he would have none of it. That indicated to me that Martin was at least concerned with the possibility that the work was evil. If others were more convinced, I can fully understand their anger, and that's all Satan needs to do his work. Verses 25 and 28 reinforce this idea and the danger it presents to those so snared. It says this, Yea, he saith unto them, Deceive and lie in wait to catch, that ye may destroy. Behold, this is no harm. And thus he flattereth them, and telleth them that it is no sin to lie, that he may catch a man in a lie, that they may destroy him. Verily, verily, I say unto you, woe be unto him that lieth to deceive, because he supposeth that another lieth to deceive. for such are not exempt from the justice of God. In other words, another's sin does not justify your own sin. At the judgment day, you cannot say, I sinned because he sinned. Now, this certainly goes against much of today's conventional thinking. Sadly, we see this all the time in both politics and in business. For some reason, I'm caused to think of the Temple Recommend question that says, are you fair and honest in your dealings with your fellow man? I remember a man I knew who boasted about answering that question this way: I am as honest as my business allows me to be. He felt perfectly justified in doing in business what he had to compete. And if that meant lying a little bit, or fudging a little bit, or cheating a little bit, that was okay. Everyone else did it, so he was just leveling the playing field. But the Temple Recommend question doesn't ask that. It says, are you fair and honest in your dealings with your fellow men? See, it's not dependent upon the other guy. And I believe this is what this part of section 10 was talking about. The people who stole the 116 pages were, by our way of thinking, evil men. And the Lord called them evil men. But one would have to ask, why were they so intent on stopping Joseph Smith? What evil had he done to them? What threat did he pose to them? And if he did pose a threat to them, why was that? Were they afraid of losing their business or their home? I don't know. But whatever it was enough to allow them to think that it was justified, maybe even sanctified by a righteous God, who was also offended at the effort Joseph was attempting to bring forth. Maybe they just thought they were defenders of the faith and he was the threat. And in that case, it was a matter of all's fair in love and war. But moving on, the Lord once more tells Joseph what the men hostile to his manuscript had in mind. He lays out the plan in greater detail. Now behold, they have altered these words, because Satan saith unto them, he hath deceived you. See, there's that attempt to make them think they are the victims. He hath deceived you, and thus he flattereth them away to do iniquity, to get thee to tempt the Lord thy God. And he explains, behold, if you should bring forth the same words, they will say that you have lied, and that you pretended to translate, but that you have contradicted yourself. And behold, they will publish this, and Satan will harden the hearts of the people to stir them up to anger against you, that they will not believe my words. But remember how section 3 begins? The works and the designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated, neither can they come to naught. So with that in mind, we come back to section 10 and read verses 34 through 41, and this is great stuff. Listen to what they say. But behold, here is wisdom, and because I show unto you wisdom, and give you commandments concerning these things, what ye shall do, show it not unto the world until you have accomplished the work of translation. Marvel not that I said unto you, here is wisdom, show it not unto the world. For I said, show it not unto the world, that you may be preserved. Behold, I do not say that you shall not show it unto the righteous. But as you cannot always judge the righteous, or as you cannot always tell the wicked from the righteous, therefore I say unto you, hold your peace until I shall see fit to make all things known unto the world concerning the matter. And now verily I say unto you, that an account of these things that you have written, which have gone out of your hands, is engraven upon the plates of Nephi. And now, because the account which is engraven upon the plates of Nephi is more particular concerning these things, which in my wisdom I would bring to the knowledge of the people in this account, therefore you shall translate the engravings which are upon the plates of Nephi down even until you come to the reign of King Benjamin, or until you come to that which you have translated, which you have retained. Now the Lord just told Joseph that the account on the small plates of Nephi is more possessed of the things the Lord would like to see distributed to the world. The original account, which was lost, was an interesting account and the life of Lehi and his family and his genealogy, and it had good things to offer. But this second account focuses more on the prophecies and the points of doctrine that the Lord deems we need to hear. And in that last verse, the Lord tells Joseph to translate down even till you come to the reign of King Benjamin, or until you come to that which you have translated, which you have retained. This is a good indication to me that Joseph and Martin may have translated more than the 116 pages that were lost. But those 116 pages represented the story, the part about the book of Lehi that Martin wanted in particular to show his wife Lucy. The fact that the Lord said to Joseph, until you come to that which you have translated, which you have retained, says that they must have translated more. And as we have already established, the loss of the 116 pages of manuscript was a great setback to the work. It stopped the translation altogether for a time, and Joseph had to return the plates and the Urim and Thummim to Moroni as well. There was a period, however brief, where Joseph thought he may have lost his privilege forever. Upon learning of the loss of the pages, he declared, all is lost, showing his state of mind. Joseph's mother wrote, no one could console him. Everyone felt his despair. Sobs and groans and the most bitter lamentations filled the house. I well remember that day of darkness, both within and without. To us at least, the heavens seemed clothed with blackness and the earth shrouded with gloom. Joseph paced the floor, weeping and grieving. I find it interesting that the translation of the Book of Mormon is wrapped in so much drama and intrigue. In particular, I find that just the fact that there is drama and intrigue and so much history and so much story surrounding it should be adequate proof that there indeed was something tangible to translate. So many different parties tried so desperately to get the plates and to stop the work. They must have been awfully sure that he really did have some ancient plates. I say that because today so many people, unwilling to look into this even a little bit, are sure that the whole story of the Book of Mormon is simply made up. It's all a fraud. He made it up in his mind. They dismiss it without thought. But nobody in 1828 thought he was making it up. They may not have been sure about the provenance of the plates, that an angel of God brought them and all of that, but they all truly believed that he had some ancient plates, and they all wanted them. And there's no question about the 116 pages either. They really existed, and a number of people got to see them and hold them and read them, and someone has them now. Listen to this from a book called Coming Forth of the Book of Mormon by Travis Goodsell. Charles Comstock Richards remembered that he and his father, LDS Apostle Franklin D. Richards, met a man in 1880, Dr. J.R. Pratt, who, quote, told my father that he could put his hands on the manuscript which Martin Harris lost in an hour if it was needed. Wherever the lost manuscript is today, it doesn't matter. We have the knowledge it intended to impart and more. And the really sweet part of all this is that the great plan of Satan was defeated before it began, when Mormon included the small plates of Nephi with his record 1,400 years earlier. I think it's remarkable that the Lord put in place 2,000 years ago the means to overcome this horrible loss of the first translation. As I go back to the Book of Mormon and read about the decision to keep two sets of plates, it seems reasonable now that Nephi might have been commanded to keep a secular record and a separate spiritual record, but perhaps not so much then to him. But what a wise move it turned out to be, and it ended up saving his, that's Nephi's, story. Allow me to review with you how that happened. It's all there in 1 Nephi 19, and as we read, listen to the foreshadowing that's contained within. 1 Nephi 19 starts like this. And it came to pass that the Lord commanded me, wherefore I did make plates of ore, that I might engraven upon them the record of my people. And upon the plates which I made, I did engraven the record of my father, see, that's Lehi, and also our journeyings in the wilderness, and the prophecies of my father, and also many of my known prophecies have I engraven upon them. What he's talking about here is what are now called the large plates of Nephi, from which Mormon took the bulk of his abridgment. Nephi didn't call them the large plates, and he says why at the beginning of the next verse. He says, "And I knew not at the time when I made them that I should be commanded of the Lord to make these plates." Now that would be what we call the small plates of Nephi, the ones from which we get these very words, as well as all the record from 1st Nephi up through Omni. "Wherefore, the record of my father and the genealogy of his fathers, and the more part of all our proceedings in the wilderness, are engraven upon those first plates of which I have spoken. Wherefore, the things which transpired before I made these plates are, of a truth, more particularly made mention of upon the first plates." See, those were a more historical account. And as he continues, we get insight into this whole process of keeping two sets of plates. "And after I had made these plates by way of commandment, I, Nephi, received a commandment that the ministry and the prophecies, the more plain and precious parts of them, should be written upon these plates, and that the things which were written should be kept for the instruction of my people who should possess the land, and also for other wise purposes, which purposes are known unto the Lord." Isn't that interesting? Nephi said the Lord had wise purposes in commanding him to keep this extra set of plates, but he didn't know what those purposes were. Today we do. We've gained a lot of information from these few verses so far. He has told us that the large plates started out with a record of his father, that would be Lehi, and of his prophecies, and also of many of Nephi's prophecies. He said that that first record had the genealogy of his father, which we really don't have in this record. We really don't know much about Lehi. And also a perhaps more detailed account of their journeyings through the wilderness. He told us he didn't know he would be commanded to keep another parallel record. As far as the genealogy of Lehi, we know that that was lost with the 116 pages, but the prophet did speak somewhat on that matter, according to the 19th century apostle Erastus Snow, and it's recorded in the Journal of Discourses. Here's what he says. "The prophet Joseph informed us that the record of Lehi was contained on the 116 pages that were first translated and subsequently stolen, and of which an abridgment is given in our first book of Nephi, which is the record of Nephi individually, he himself being of the lineage of Manasseh, but that Ishmael was of the lineage of Ephraim, and that his sons married into Lehi's family, and Lehi's sons married Ishmael's daughters, thus fulfilling the words of Jacob upon Ephraim and Manasseh in the 48th chapter of Genesis, which says, 'And let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the land.'" In 1985, a letter supposedly from Lucy Mack Smith to her sister, the year before the church was organized, was presented to the world by Mark Hoffman, a dealer of rare and old books and documents. He turned out to be a forger and later a convicted killer, now serving a life sentence. The letter from Lucy turned out to be one of his forgeries. However, it sounded very authentic and contained elements that still may have been true, notwithstanding that the document itself was forged. That forgery claimed that Lucy recounted to her sister some of the particulars of the Book of Mormon narrative, including the information that Lehi, quote, fled from Jerusalem with his family, and also his wife's brother's family a few days before Nebuchadnezzar besieged the city and laid it in ashes. Since the Sariah Ishmael sibling connection is not explicit in the current text of the Book of Mormon, a reasonable inference was that Lucy had learned the detail from the 116 pages. As I said, the document itself proved to be a forgery, but the information contained within it might have had a foundation of truth. A filial connection between Sariah and Ishmael might have been a good reason for Lehi to send his sons to get Ishmael and his family and convince them to go with them. And if you recall, it seems that Ishmael hesitated not at all to pick up his family and leave just as readily as Lehi and his family did. Who knows what other interesting little details we lost with the loss of the first 116 pages? But that's life. As we continue to read from 1 Nephi 19, we get this. Wherefore I, Nephi, did make a record upon the other plates, which give an account, or which gives a greater account of the wars and contentions and the destructions of my people. And this I have done, and commanded my people what they should do after I was gone, that these plates should be handed down from one generation to another, or from one prophet to another, until further commandments from the Lord. So now we return to the 10th section of the Doctrine and Covenants and continue with that. We had last read verse 41, and the next verses, 42 through 44, say this, And behold, you shall publish it as the record of Nephi, and thus I will confound those who have altered my words. See, the Lord saying, I want you to go back and translate this other part from the small plates, and that is going to replace what you lost. I will not suffer that they shall destroy my work. Yea, I will show unto them that my wisdom is greater than the cunning of the devil. Behold, they have only got a part, or an abridgment of the account of Nephi. At first flush, this might sound strange because Nephi himself said that the other part had more detail. But in 1 Nephi 19, he said, the record of my father and the genealogy of his fathers, and the more part of all our proceedings in the wilderness are engraven upon those first plates of which I have spoken. Wherefore the things which transpired before I made these plates are, of a truth, more particularly made mention of upon the first plates. But in verse 45 of section 10, the Lord reveals his thinking. He says, Behold, there are many things engraven upon the plates of Nephi, which do throw greater views on my gospel. Therefore it is wisdom in me that you should translate this first part of the engravings of Nephi and send it forth in this work. I guess it would have been nice to learn more of the history, but the Lord says that it is the points of his gospel that are most important. So while we lose some of the details of their history and of their journey, we get more of the gospel essentials from this second record. Verses 46 and 47 say something interesting as well. And behold, all the remainder of this work does contain all those parts of my gospel, which my holy prophets, yea, and also my disciples, desired in their prayers should come forth unto this people. And I said unto them that it should be granted unto them according to their faith. Now I share this with you because I want you to realize that when this was given, Joseph Smith had yet to translate the replacement parts of 1 Nephi through Omni. He was being commanded to do so, but he had not yet started, so he didn't know what those pages contained. Yet we read in Enos, the last part that Joseph would get to, and this is a wonderful passage. Let me read it. And after I, Enos, had heard these words, my faith began to be unshaken in the Lord, and I prayed unto him with many long strugglings for my brethren the Lamanites. And it came to pass that after I had prayed and labored with all diligence, the Lord said unto me, I will grant unto thee according to thy desires, because of thy faith. And now, behold, this was the desire which I desired of him, that if it should be that my people the Nephites should fall into transgression, and by any means be destroyed, and the Lamanites should not be destroyed, that the Lord God would preserve a record of my people, the Nephites, even if it so be by the power of his holy arm, that it might be brought forth at some future day unto the Lamanites, that perhaps they might be brought unto salvation. Wherefore, I, knowing that the Lord God was able to preserve our records, I cried unto him continually, for he had said unto me, Whatsoever thing ye shall ask in faith, believing that ye shall receive in the name of Christ, ye shall receive it. And I had faith, and I did cry unto God that he would preserve the records, and he covenanted with me that he would bring them forth unto the Lamanites in his own due time. And I, Enos, knew it would be according to the covenant which he had made. Therefore, my soul did rest. I know that was kind of long, but did you hear that? This desire This concern that Enos had that his record might be preserved was satisfied by the Lord, who covenanted with him that it would come forth. And it did, because of the record kept on the second set of plates that Nephi made and wrote upon. I don't know, but this account may not have been on the first record, because that was more of a historical record and not concerned with a more personal history, like the story we have of Enos. But the Lord had promised Enos, and happily we have his account. And this account was translated after Joseph received this 10th section of the Doctrine and Covenants, which said, once again, the remainder of this work does contain all those parts of my gospel which my holy prophets and also my disciples desired in their prayers should come forth unto this people. This is referring directly to the desires of Enos that we find in the book of Enos. But section 10 continues, Yea, and this was their faith, that my gospel which I gave unto them, that they might preach in their days, might come unto their brethren the Lamanites, and also all that became Lamanites because of their dissensions. Now this is not all. Their faith in their prayers was that this gospel should be made known also, if it were possible, that other nations should possess this land. Yea, that it might be free unto all of whatsoever nation, kindred, tongue, or people they may be. I don't know about you, but I find this prophecy, because that's what it was. It was a prophecy here in this 10th section. I find this so interesting because it was given to Joseph Smith as he was about to embark on the retranslation of the story through a different set of records that would contain all of the things this prophecy is talking about. And before I go today, I'd like to tell you how and why we even have this second set of plates, because I think this is a fascinating story. We find this in the tiny little section called the Words of Mormon that was inserted into the record right after the collection of Enos, Jerem, and Omni, and just before the Book of Mosiah. The chronological record continues on with Mosiah and King Benjamin, but before he got to that, Mormon wanted to say a few words of his own, so he inserted these few thoughts. He says, and listen carefully, and now I, Mormon, being about to deliver up the record which I have been making into the hands of my son. See, he was finishing up his abridgment of the large plates of Nephi here. Skipping just a little bit, he says, for after I had made an abridgment from the plates of Nephi down to the reign of this King Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, that was in the Book of Omni, you read about that, I searched among the records which had been delivered into my hands, and I found these plates, which contain this small account of the prophets from Jacob down to the reign of Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi. And the things which are upon the plates pleasing me, because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ, and my fathers knowing that many of them have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass. Wherefore I chose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write 100th part of the things of my people. But behold, I shall take these plates, which contain these prophesyings and revelations, and put them with the remainder of my record. For I know that they are choice unto me, and I know they will be choice unto my brethren. It sounds like the small plates of Nephi were almost skipped over and ignored by Mormon, in which case we would have simply lost that whole first part of our Book of Mormon and the story of Nephi and how the whole thing began. But then, at the last moment, he was inspired to go back and look through his piles of records, and luckily for us, he found them. So here again, we see the path that brought these second records to Joseph Smith, and we see that the promises of the Lord that he made to Enos were kept by the actions of Mormon. And we see here in the 10th section of the Doctrine and Covenants, before all of this was revealed to us, that this great story was foretold to Joseph as he began to recover from the loss that he and Martin Harris had suffered. That confirms to me the validity of this revelation given to Joseph Smith, and it bears testimony to the holy nature of this great work. Well, we've covered a lot today, and we haven't even touched the 11th section given to Joseph for his brother Hiram. But As that section deals with much the same advice and counsel as has already been given to others, I think I will leave that for you to study on your own. So, until next week, please be safe and well, and have a great week. I'm Mark Swint. Thank you for listening.